guys, it's me, the comeback coach. Guys, this is going to be an awesome episode. Yes, we're bringing the thunder because my boy said I need to bring my own weather sometimes. So I'm bringing the thunder, and I know he's going to be bringing the lightning. My brother Nate is the Swiss Army knife of positivity. I love him. He's amazing. I've been on his show. Now he's on ours. Guys, if you want to scale your business, we're going to teach you 3 things today that you can start doing today to start scaling your business in 2024. And I'm also, if you're a business owner or if you're a podcaster, if you buy my book for $30, you're going to get $995 worth of value. And I'll talk about it at the end. So Nate, my brother, Nate the Great is in the house. Welcome, brother. How are you doing today?
I'm awesome, Richard. Thank you so much. And I'll put it on for the record. I did buy mine already, so mine is in transit. So I'm right there with the line of everybody else. And you're excellent. And congratulations on your sold out on the first round and the next round coming through. And absolutely phenomenal work with that book, Richard, and everything you're doing.
And I love it. And if it wasn't for Mr. John Lee Dumas, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. And he actually wrote the whole back cover. So, guys, if you don't know John Lee Dumas, he's making $250,000 a month from his podcast. So, guys, if you don't know John Lee, you need to know John Lee. And he actually taught me personally. So I'm going to teach you what he taught me. I don't know anything on my own. I'm just standing on the shoulders of giants. So, okay. So, Nate, my first question is, you got 8 people in your household, 130-pound dog. You're in business, you're crushing it in business, but your life hasn't always been sunshine, rainbows, sprinkles, and unicorns. So what is your definition of resiliency?
I would say resiliency is a straight determination, grit and grind. I know those are the cheesiest phrases that you hear all the time, but it's really getting up every time. And that could be everything from Richard when, it doesn't happen as much today with the way things are in society, but the days where you got punched in the gut one time and you had to get up and move to the next spot, that literally on the playground meant that I had that happen. I remember being in 3rd grade, 4th grade and having just a shot right to the gut. And I remember going home and I remember just being like, oh man, and then I never retaliated. I just took it. And I kind of sat back and I said, man. And then there's moments where I look back at that and I think, was that weak? Was that should I have responded? And there's many times in my life where I've responded when I shouldn't have, when I've, whether it's raised my voice or acted a certain way or anything like that. And looking back at that moment though in school, the resiliency is taking that moment, learning about that moment, and deciding which path and trying not to let that moment happen again. Now, if someone did act upon me, I can't control that. So why would I waste my life being sad about that? That's them acting upon me. That's their issue. But I can only control the actions that I put out every day. So really, it's been in my later life that I can claim that confidence and that comfort in myself. And it's not been my entire life. That's for really honest and raw truth there.
So, okay. So as you're talking, I mean, you gave me like 2 Rocky metaphors, like right in a row. And I love how, Rocky always says it's not how hard you get hit, but how hard you hit back. But sometimes, like, I agree with you, as I get older, now I'm 55, now I sit back and I think before I hit back. And I think, okay, is this going to get me where I'm going, or is this going to take away from my goals? And I think that's when self-awareness comes about, because that's when you could sit back like a chess move and be like, all right, if I move this here, can they take me here? So instead of making that one quick move, you might sit back, scratch your chin for a couple minutes and say, I'm going to make this move strategically. Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly that. And one of the reasons too, and this happens with a lot of people as I get in these conversations, is I had a lot of success that was back to back to back at a very early age in my life, where I did not have the life experience at certain points to understand what that success, how to handle that success responsibly. I do not blame anyone else in that aspect. That's looking back at myself, just understanding the context of what went on. And one of those things is looking back at that as well. There's when you're in that success, it's hard to look at the negative. So it's hard to, when you're very successful, it's hard to look back and say, what is possibly going wrong here? And when you really start pulling the layers, you can start seeing the house of cards that's being built. And that's not saying all success is a house of cards. Absolutely not. But when success is building and that momentum is building and that volume is growing and the weight is growing, having the self-awareness, if I was to go back 15 years with the self-awareness I've gained in the past year and a half, I definitely could tell you that there's a lot more things I do differently. And not to say I wouldn't do them, but here's what I would say, Richard, I would do them more sustainably. And I don't mean environmentally or economic or anything like that. Economically, I mean resourcefully, my own brain, for my own mental health.
Now, as you see, I'm writing stuff down because I don't want to forget. I do have a traumatic brain injury, so if I don't write stuff down, I will forget. So I just want to put that out there. I'm not ignoring you. I'm actually writing what you're saying because I want to get back to it later. But first,
Richard,
I also wanted to thank Celsius for keeping my ass up and going. I got 6 interviews today, and if it wasn't for Celsius Energy, I wouldn't be able to go. So tell us a little bit about where you come from, where'd you grow up, and how did you start seeing success at such an early age? Because I've noticed that a lot of people, when they've had successes early, they get fat, dumb, and happy. They rest on their laurels, and then they don't succeed again. But I believe, like I had Mr. Rich Davini on. He's a Navy SEAL commander, and he taught me the 3-minute rule. He taught me, if you have a success, celebrate for 3 minutes, move on. Or if I have somebody that cancels on me for a show, I'm pissed off for 3 minutes and then I move on. So talk about, a little bit about where you come from, where'd you grow up, and where did this whole entrepreneurial spirit come from?
Richard, you actually, I'm not going to lie, we are live and I am nervous. You're the first person to ever ask me this question, and you're the first person that's going to get this information documented. So I am. How far do we want to go? Do you want to go to the rainy Tuesday on the side of the road? I can go there.
Put it this way: they call me the male Oprah. They call me the GI Joe Rogan. So we'll go as deep as you want to go deep.
All right, Richard. All right, let's go, man. I will. I'll be honest with you. Yeah, the hairs are up on the arms, but let's dive in for my first one. All right. So, in all honesty, this is a 100% true story. My parents were born in Levittown, and grew up in Levittown, Pennsylvania, across the street from each other. If you know Levittown, it's very cut and dry, very storyboard, and literally in most people's textbooks, when you open up the textbook and look at Levittown, whether it's Levittown, Pennsylvania, Levittown, New York, there's a lot of them that were created post-war as a great area for people to grow up in the suburbs. That's where I lived until I was about 7 or 8. My dad worked for General Motors in Philadelphia. So that's where I was growing up in that area. Then all of a sudden in the early 90s, all the plants started closing down. So the layoffs started happening, and my dad, they closed down the plant. He moved to another plant. They closed that plant down. He moved to another plant. So he's like constantly laid off. And I had some great memories. I had awesome times when my dad was not a typical union worker. And I'm going to say something in a weird way, and I'm going to say the negative side of union workers. My dad is a union worker that is proud of his union and works very hard in his union, while at the same time, there are union workers that take advantage of the system that exists in the union. My dad is not one of those people. So every time my dad was laid off, his choice was to go do community service via General Motors programs that they set up, or he could sit at the shop house and play poker with everybody all day long for as many days or weeks or years that may take. My dad chose to do the community service path every day. So he was always out doing different things, meeting the community, things like that. He literally worked on a dude ranch when I was a kid. So I got to go out on the dude ranch and go out and in the morning, get the eggs off the chickens and making ice cream and all kinds of stuff. And those are some of my earliest memories. I will also let you know that on my mom's side, I spoke with my dad there. On my mom's side of things, my mom, she had cancer at a very young age. She had ovarian cancer in her late teens, early 20s. Crazy story about the whole reason I even exist ties to her cancer is that she went to a doctor, and the doctor said, we need to, she had a time that she went and thought she was pregnant. And this is in the mid 90s or early 80s, mid early 80s. And she thought that it was, she was going to have a baby, but they eventually, once the sonograms and everything like that and the ultrasounds and all that came through, realized it was a tumor. So with that tumor, they went through the process to extract her ovaries and go through all of that. She's in her late teens, early 20s. Her whole life just wanted to be a mother. And happened to be that two 15-year-olds were in a abortion clinic. Back then, it was a lot different than we have today. It's kind of an abortion clinic, also like a maternity ward. It was a very mixed hybrid type of facility in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And my biological parents were in there to get an abortion. And the doctor that took out my mother's ovaries happened to also work at that facility and was able to, however it was done in the 80s, convince my biological parents not to have an abortion and to have me and connect me to my mother, who adopted me the day I was born. So it was a closed adoption. I do not have any history or anything like that. I've never met them. I've had various points of degrees in which different points in my life that I've had a desire, mainly when I started to have kids because of the health aspects. When you start having children and you start having to fill out your health histories at all the doctor's appointments, and I put a giant X on every single page, that started to mentally affect me. So I think that I don't think I thought about it much at all my whole life until I got to that point. I've never had a bit of remorse or wonder about the parents part. My biggest wonder is always the siblings part, because I was an only child, so I always wondered about siblings and such. But
but did you ever? Now with the age of technology, did you ever do a 23andMe, or did you ever do anything like that?
I am on there, Richard, and I've gotten to like I think like second cousins now, and had communication, but nobody. It's funny when you're when you're the adopted kid coming into the family tree, and that's your intro line. Nobody wants to talk to you because nobody wants to disturb anything. So there's either a story there or there's not. But either way, I can tell you that so far I've not hit anything other than what's been automatically forced through 23andMe. And when I've engaged those people, when it shows up, they don't answer. So so far I can say that there's something interesting going on there. But I completely understand that point of view when you're the adoptee trying to reach out and connect. So it's not a daily thing. It's not a monthly thing. It's not a thing that obsesses my mind, but it definitely has affected my life. I will be honest with you. I cannot pretend that it is not a big piece of my entire life. And I can say, back to the entrepreneurial spirit, that's what I'm trying to get to, actually, is to tie back to that. Because for that reason, it's when you grow up adopted, and it's interesting when you grow up adopted and you're the same. I'm going to get into something that only speaks to me anecdotally. So it's one thing, I've talked to a lot of adopted people, and whether you're African-American child or an Asian child adopted into a Caucasian family, or an Asian child adopted into a African-American family, those ways, it's obvious when you're adopted. So people don't make comments like, oh, blah, blah, blah. Like, things, they don't make those kind of comments around you because they know you're adopted. They don't make offhanded comments. When you're a white guy adopted into a white family who's 6'3", 300 pounds, and happens to be in a family of 12, 15 people that are all the same size and we all look alike. So, so even though I'm adopted, we all are built the same way. So when people are around us, nobody ever thinks that I'm adopted. And that's when you get to see the other side of humanity and people's real observations of what adoption is. So I don't know if like growing up, that was like the joke when you were siblings. You know what I mean? You like be like, oh, we told Johnny he's adopted. And then he's sitting in the corner and mom's trying to console him. You're not adopted. I had you. That stuff was tough, like growing up. And my mom actually just recently opened up to me about, when it was tough when I was a kid. I would ask her, apparently my single digit age, like, like any kid does, mommy, did I come from your belly? Things like that. And she was honest with me my whole life and said no. And told me the story that I told you. And that's the snippet of what it is. And that's the story that's been going for that long. And back to the entrepreneurial part, when you don't exist and you exist in an area of only emotional ties. So you have no existence of bloodlines. So when you read up ancestry and these rooted things that people have in their lives that tie them to somewhere, but you're just a floating entity that's not really tied to a tree, that drives my entrepreneurial spirit because it's given me the freedom and independence that I can honestly say has been the biggest Achilles heel to me, as well as my biggest point of quality of positivity, I'd say, is my
Yeah,
freedom of independence.
and by the way, people from Pennsylvania, especially that area, Levittown, they're some of the hardest working people. I mean, anybody from Pennsylvania, you know, they're hardworking. They bust their ass. They have a strong work ethic. So I wanted to give a big shout out to Pennsylvania, especially Pennsylvania. I spent a majority of my life in Pennsylvania. But something I'm thinking about because, uh, like for me, I had generational curses. Like I had a father, which was a sperm donor, but my father left me, and his father left him. So I always grew up thinking, well, this is going to happen to me. So I always had that in the back of my mind. But I'm thinking if I was you, you know, okay, I got a clean slate because there is only one me. There is nobody else. So if I fail, if I succeed, it's all on me. So I'm pretty much creating family generational blessings because I don't have to worry about the curses that are there.
And that's exactly it. And like you said, Richard, that's the amazing part about the family that is my family. The family that adopted me the day I was born. They're exactly what you described. It's that gritty, that blue collar, that we will work for anything, and that just will do whatever it takes to survive and do whatever it takes to support our families. And that's what I grew up in. So while I detach myself from a bloodline and from a roots, my entire existence and personality, while yes, it is that floating ambiguous that I use sometimes to paint the picture, I also have a visceral connection to the people, to the Fochtman family and to the Five family and to all the different families that off of those family trees. I'm one of the biggest. Everybody jokes around like I'm like the number one that makes their family trees and all this stuff because I'm obsessed with it because I think that I don't have it. It's given me that obsession, and I've created their family trees and things like that, and they're my family trees. You know what I mean? Like they're my family as well, and I'm just lucky to have two stories. And that's the way I look at it, Richard, is I get to have two stories. I get to have a pre-birth existence that I have no idea about and a post-birth. And I exactly hear what you say about the uniqueness. And it has been it has not been some revelation I woke up to. I've been in therapy, gone through different therapists and things like that. And for myself, I'm a year and a half into my sobriety from alcohol. And that's been a big thing, that I used negatively. I exactly. And that was tied to a lot of this and a lot of many things. And it goes back to the success. So I had success when I was a raging alcoholic, but not a raging alcoholic like you think. Now, when I say raging alcoholic, somebody thinks about some guy in his undershirt sweating and running around the house. I was the raging alcoholic that closed the bar at 2 a.m. because I was signing deals. And then I went to sleep for 3 hours. And then I was still at my desk signing more deals and doing sales presentations at 6, 7 a.m. the next day. And I did that for many, many years. And I was very successful in it because also I was selling alcohol. So I was the poster child of my products.
So pretty much you were the wolf of Beer Street.
That's a great way to say it. And to be honest with you, if you go online, Richard, and you look up, it might exist. The company, I'm not going to name the company, but I can say the brand because I own the brand. The brand is called The Beer Ace. So THE space beer space ace. And that brand was the brand that we had started that won that company many awards across the country, who were acknowledged across the country for things that they were doing in York, Pennsylvania. So as you know, York, Pennsylvania is not really a massive area. It's not a big metro market. And they were getting national recognition for the creative ideas we did for that program there. So yeah, when I talk about raging and during that time, I was very successful. I made them a lot of money and I lived a really nice life during that time. But I did not understand what was going on behind the scenes in my own self.
Okay, so let's talk about that because I'm actually listening, and I'm a ninth grade dropout. We talked about that. I've read over 6,000 books. I got 18 going right now, plus 2 audios, and I'm actually listening again to The Wolf of Wall Street, his business book, Jordan Belfort's book. and he talks about there's a difference between being successful and being successful. Like
Yep.
I talk to people and I tell them, what good, because everybody knows I'm 100% real 100% of the time. I've been I've had 2 practice marriages. I'm happily married. I got a beautiful bride, but for me, having a big house, having a big boat, a big account, and the toys, but eating dinner at the kitchen table by myself, for me, that's not success. So talk to us about, what people think success is and what your definition now of what success is.
I grew up, like I said, in Levittown area, but after Levittown, we moved around a lot. So my dad got laid off in the early '90s from General Motors, so he got transferred to a couple different plant areas in Jersey, and then also down to West Virginia, which is where I landed for quite a while. And so they actually still live there in West Virginia, along with my mother's parents live down there. And so, while living in West Virginia, I saw a whole different side of the world. So there's your first 7 years or so, 6 to 7 years. I'm in the Philadelphia suburbs, that classic Norman Rockwell painting, like whatever you want to say about the suburban life. And then I go to West Virginia, and West Virginia was a whole different world. And it was a beautiful place. It was an amazing people. I love everybody that was there, but it was much different. And my personality didn't necessarily fit in certain ways there. So I had a lot of good times there, but I was only there for a couple of years. So I moved over there about I think it was like 8 or 9. We moved to West Virginia, and then we had there was a series of things that happened in our family. My cousin, my dad's sister and her kids lived with us pretty much my whole life growing up until that point. So I'm about 10 years old at this point. So I have my parents, my aunt, and my 2 cousins. We all live in the same house in West Virginia. And one February 15th, they go out one morning. This is back in the mid 90s, 96, 95. I'm trying to remember now. And got in a car accident. And they were driving up to go to a funeral in Maine. And on Interstate 81, ironically, right here in York. My cousin Mikey, who was about 5 months younger than me, passed away. He was instantly killed. He was asleep in the back seat with his head down. And when 2 tractor trailers collided, another tractor trailer came across the median. Literally 3 to 4 tractor trailers sandwiched the car. It looked like a suitcase when it was finished. And my aunt survived, and my cousin Katie survived. She was in the front seat. She just happened to have some pillows up on the dashboard, so she was, in the hospital. My aunt was in the hospital for a long time. My cousin Mikey, we were basically brothers. I would say that we grew up. That's it. I mean, we lived together. We were 5 months apart. You can just imagine. We both loved Ninja Turtles. Like, you can imagine what that was. So what I'm trying to get at is, I'm 10 years old. This happens. And 6 months later, a friend of mine commits suicide with a shotgun. And then about 6 to 12 months after that, my uncle passes away. He's in a 30 or 31 years old, accidental. I don't know if it wasn't intentional, but an accidental overdose, alcohol, marijuana, and pills for his bad back and stuff in his early 30s. So now you're at 12 years old, you're in 7th or 8th grade, and life is pretty intense. So trying to figure that out, navigate all that. You're also navigating the understanding now that you're starting to come to understandings about the adoption. While I was like understanding, my mom was telling me about it. It wasn't coming to terms really until all these deaths started hitting, because that, you're sitting at these funerals and everybody just gets to that point. And I think then 8th grade comes, and I don't remember exactly what reasoning it was, whether it was try to advance the future of the life or things were getting too heavy or wherever it was. But the opportunity came for me to have a wrestling scholarship to a boarding school that was about an hour away from my parents' house in Mercersburg, Pennsylvania, called Mercersburg Academy. Yep. And so I had a wrestling scholarship there, and I took it. I went there, and I was introduced to a whole nother world. So now we're at a suburban life. Now we're at a West Virginia rural town and on the Eastern Panhandle. And now we're at freshman year of high school, and we're in rural Pennsylvania at a boarding school with some of the largest elite people in the country's children. I did not have a grasp of that at the time. They were just friends. It wasn't really until later in life or later in high school when I started to realize what all those kids' parents did. and what types of jobs they had, whether they were senators, former, I don't want to go through naming anybody, but I can just name it was a lot compared to coming from Levittown, West Virginia, and then all of a sudden you're in there with millionaires and billionaires and how that life is. And that was amazing. And that was what I was trying to get at, is living there and existing there was a great understanding for me for the future of what the world was holding. I think was understanding and seeing what is out there, but also knowing that it's not yours yet was a big lesson throughout the course of my high school career. I had a scholarship job at the school. So all the kids were doing, I forget what recreational activity it was, but during something where it was open time, scholarship kids had to do work. And so we would go through, and my scholarship job was you'll like this, Richard, I'm dating myself as well with the gray hairs and my beard. So this was pre-scanners. It was right when scanners were becoming popular, and the science department at the school wanted to digitalize all of their magazines. So they brought me into this closet that just has like 8 to 10 foot stacks of science magazines, and they hand me a razor blade. And they'd have me start cutting out the articles and the photos of the razor blade and then stitching it all up into the scanner thing so that it would be a printable thing that could go.
Real quick, I just want to thank Jocelyn for hopping on. Thank you for watching. If you're finding interested, make sure you just share that out. But so you went from, because I have a lot of friends from West Virginia, you went from a hardworking town to a hardworking state to another hardworking state. Yeah. And by the way, I'm a big Mountaineer fan. I love the Mountaineers. So, but then you start getting around people that they're in a different echelon, but you realize that, like for me, I think now as I've gotten into personal development and had talks with Brunson and Milet and Robbins, that there's a difference between working hard and then thinking hard, because there's a reason why the book, by Napoleon Hill says, think and grow rich, not work and grow rich. I mean, you got to do both. But I think when you're around people that are more successful, they think first and then they work, to where a lot of people, when they're first starting out, they work and then maybe think later. So talk about that. The mindset of somebody that is successful is different just than the average everyday Joe.
Well, I can tell you, Richard, I'm still figuring it out, because every day I still struggle with the working smarter, not harder. That's what my dad always, like, he retired about 2 or 3 years ago from General Motors finally. And that was what he always drilled into my head. He never went to college. He went right into U.S. Steel right out of high school. And then from U.S. Steel, he went into General Motors. And my mom went to college. When I went to the high school, my mom went to college and got her undergraduate degree. So that time was awesome in our family, because I went to high school. I get this kind of step in the right direction. And my mom also goes back and she goes to Shepherd University to get her teaching degree. So she goes to college and I'm going to this school, and that helped her, I think, during the time. I don't know if she ever admits this or not, but I'll make fun of her on this. That probably helped her empty nest syndrome, because my dad worked a lot and then she was at the house. When I went away to the boarding school, I'm sure she was at home by herself. I don't think we had any cat. I think we had a cat. So I'm sure it helped her. But getting into there, out of the empty nesting, she always wanted to be a teacher. So it was the timing for her worked out, the timing for me worked out, and everything like that. When I get back to what we were talking about there with the echelon, that was really, it was interesting. And there's two parts to it. I'll tell you, Richard, there was good and the bad. So like the good parts are like, sometimes like my parents, I don't know if my parents missed any event of my life, of being a sporting event. And I was in football, wrestling, soccer, rugby, everything except for college. And my mom will laugh when she hears this, because my mom barely could watch my wrestling matches in high school. This is how she watched all of my wrestling. And then when I got to college and I started playing rugby, she just straight up couldn't even watch it, period. So that's why she would have to listen to the matches afterward, just because of the brutality of it, I guess. But with that being said, I'm all over the place right now. Bring me back to where we were. Oh, the echelon of working harder, not smarter.
Well, but then I wanted to bring something up before we even get to that, because I think you're like my 1230th interview. And most of the people that I've talked to, most of the gentlemen that I've talked to that are uber successful, a lot of them have backgrounds in wrestling. And I think personally, then you can give me your opinion. I think that when you're wrestling, because a lot of the wrestling season is around Thanksgiving. So when everybody else is eating crap, you're like, no, I'm just going to have this chicken thigh and some broccoli. I have to cut weight
boiled chicken thigh.
because I got to cut weight because I have a match coming up. But also knowing that if you get pinned, there's nobody else to blame. It's you and you alone, and the training is horrendous. For anybody that's ever wrestled out there, you guys are amazing. So why do you think that a lot of people that are uber successful have a wrestling background?
I can tell you a lot of reasons, and it's funny you bring that up because every time I run into them, somehow we're already, magnetically drawn to each other, and I think by personalities, and then we find it out like later. It's not even the opening conversation. Like recently with Spot On, which is a merchant services and restaurant technology company over in San Francisco, California. Their VP of sales, him and I were talking for the longest time, and then all of a sudden realized, I was like, man, we really think alike. And then I find out wrestling. It's one of those things where when you go back to wrestling is exactly like you said. It's this team sport. So it's like business, okay? So business is a team sport. Let's say you're a salesman, a saleswoman, a salesman, a marketing person, or anything like that. The company as a whole has to work together for the common goal. But when you wake up every day, you are only responsible for you and your actions that you contribute to the whole team. So if you're in a tightly knit community of your work and everything's so integrated and interconnected and interdependent, and you're dragging it down, it's just like in wrestling when you're in a dual meet or in a tournament, there's still a team score that you're trying to work towards. But like you just said, when you go out and you walk in the middle of that circle, it's to that psychology, because there's literally no one is allowed to even come inside that ring to help you. So I think of like Clifford Starks a few weeks ago. I had interviewed him, a former UFC fighter, and we were talking about that a little bit. When you go into that ring or you go into that octagon and it's just you and that person, that feeling I still get. I got it right now while I'm talking to you. My arms, my leg hairs, my arm hairs, everything's standing right now. That feeling, that adrenaline, that passion for a competition transcends business. And it transcends and universally goes right over to it. Because it's at the end of the day, if you're a route salesman and you're driving that car every day, or you're going out there, only you can control your route. You know what I mean? Only you can control how much work you do. Only you can control how many stops you hit. Same thing if you're a driver on the truck. You could be a driver on a truck. I've been one. And there's times where you can choose your route or you can be lazy and slow down. And you can say, oh, you know what? I want some overtime today. So I'm going to drag this out all day long to get some overtime so I can get an extra $20 in my pocket. Did I do that in my 20s? Yeah, because I was taught by other people that that's what you do. In my later years, what I learned was it doesn't get you anywhere to like be so self-focused that you just start dragging out. Because what then happens is everybody starts to look at you differently. And you don't care about what everybody's opinion is. I don't care about what people's opinion is of me, but I want them to have the right opinion. So what I'm trying to say is I can't control what your opinion is, Richard, of Nate, or what John's opinion is of Nate. But what I can control is what it is that I'm putting out for them to see and choose to make their interpretation and their perception of.
All right, so then let me ask you a question, because something, and it just hit me, something we talked about before we even come on air. Like recently, I've had the honor to talk to UFC Hall of Famer Randy Couture, Kurt Angle, Mick Foley, DDP, and I fought in the cage for a little while, but I always had the choice to bring my own weather, as you bring it, as you talk about it.
That's credit to Doug Hines over at Spot On, yeah.
Well, like before I come on any episode, or before I have any speaking engagement, I put on "Lose Yourself" by Eminem, and that gets me into my zone. That gets me into, I'm choosing my weather. But when I fought, I would walk into the octagon, and I was the silent storm. I got real quiet and I got real focused. And so I brought my own weather, like you say. So I think whether you're going to a sales presentation, whether you're on the truck slinging beer or if you're bartending slinging beer, the weather that you bring is what you're going to reap, right?
You're exactly right. And it's one of those things too, like just like in wrestling, there's another thing in wrestling. If everybody's ever been to a tournament or anything like that in high school or middle school or whatever age, there's now it's not like that. There's screens with projectors, but back then it was called the bracket hallway. So it was all the brackets of the tournaments were taped up on the hallways, and it was like 8.5 by 11 copy papers, or it was big sheets of poster boards. And everybody, all the wrestlers would go, and that's where you went to find out what your match was. And when you were standing there looking at your bracket, there was a good chance your competitor would be standing right next to you looking at the same bracket, and you'd be physically next to each other. Now, there's also that, everybody sees that in the UFC and all the other fights where they get together at a press conference and they do that whole thing. That literally happens sometimes, like where you're just sitting there and you have that awkward thing. I was a little different. And my dad's like one of the ones that's always like, he would go there and see who you were looking at, and he would go check out their records, and he would be like, all right, this is what's going to happen. And I was just like, as you know from my podcast, I was no scripts, no agenda, didn't give a shit. Sorry if I can't say that. I don't care who I was wrestling. I didn't give a flying F. Who I was wrestling, I didn't care who they were. I didn't even want to make eye contact with them because I didn't care what was in their eyes. I didn't care what was anything else. I wanted to look at their hips because their hips would tell me and their feet would tell me where they were going. And that was it. Yep. I didn't care what their muscles were or anything like that. Another interesting thing, Richard, is, and this is something that has funny stories with it, so it's not all success, but when I wrestled, I had the first couple of years, I was cutting weight like crazy because I could only fit in a certain weight class because there was guys on the team that were just national champs and I couldn't beat them. So if I wanted to be on varsity, I had to cut weight. Then my sophomore to my junior year, the weight classes opened up, so I got to be a big boy. So I jumped in, and I was 192 pounds, and I wrestled 215, and I wrestled heavyweight my junior and senior year. And I ended up going to states for 3 times in a row, nationals 3 times in a row, took second at states, things like that in the 275 weight class while I was only weighing 192. So also to add that to your effect there, I also didn't care because people would always, there are little articles when I was a kid that were in the newspaper, something about David and Goliath type comments and stuff like that. Cause you'd see me out in the match and I'd be giving up 100 pounds every time I was going out on the mat, and I was winning because I didn't care, because I cared if I won, but I didn't care who they were. I didn't let them intimidate me. I didn't let them get in my head at all. I didn't let the physicalness of them go in. I let the technique and the story and the action speak for themselves. And I lost that. So here's where I'm going to get to is my self-reflection and my own counseling therapy and conversations with friends. That's the point in my life when I had that focus and that everything I'm telling you. And then there was a point in my life where I lost all that. So I would tell you honestly, when my life started to get off of the rails with substances and all kinds of things where I was successful, but there was a whole lot of skeletons in that closet, that time was right when wrestling ended for me.
All right, so I want to talk about.
That's what I'm trying to get. There was a structure there that I snapped. Yeah.
Oh, well, because I want to talk about is eventually we're in a couple of minutes we're going to be talking about systems.
Yep.
And how important in business systems is. But now I ran Lennox Lewis's training camp for 5 fights when he fought he was the heavyweight champion of the world. And his systems were that his mother cooked every meal for him. His system was Emmanuel Stewart was his trainer for every fight. His hands were wrapped a certain way every single time. So he figured out a system that works for him and stayed consistent. So we're going to talk about business in a little bit. And I love how you're such a system guy, because when I was with GNC for over 30 years, everything went through our POS system, point of sale system. And if you have a shitty system, your whole business is going to be shitty, right?
You're exactly right, and that's in my life. That's with Spot On. That's a lot what we do, and it's a lot of that. It's helping people with their systems. So it's funny that I never made the connection until we're sitting here right now in real time that I'm making the connection of how systems based my passion was. I don't think I realized that as much until we're talking right now, Richard.
But because the reason I want to talk about is systems. now I'm 6 years in now. I have 1,200 episodes. I'm finally getting my system down. But I realized that Ed Milet, Gary Vaynerchuk, Patrick Bet-David, they all have a system that works. So sometimes I have to look and say, okay, what is Gary? What is Patrick? What are these people doing that are the top of this food chain? What are their systems and how can I use it in my system? Like if I'm going to open up a burger place, I don't want Uncle Frank's burger system. I want to understand, okay, McDonald's does not have the best burgers, but they have the best systems. And people don't realize that, McDonald's is the largest landowner in the world. If you didn't know that, now you know. But they have the best systems, and that's why they're at the top of the food chain, because of their systems. So let's start talking entrepreneurship and systems, because it all starts with a system. If you don't have a good system, you're not going to last, especially in today's world, right?
You're 100%, Richard. You're 100% correct. And I'm most of my career has been in aside from when I was in the beer wholesale world, I was still doing, so I was working my own business. So my business that I've owned since 2008 is called Free Mind. And that's kind of when people ask me what is your strategy? What is your system? I tell people that it's Free Mind, and that's the name of my business. It's Free Mind LLC. 2008, I was in college, and that was the idea, was I was going to go to other businesses and get people and free their mind so that they could focus on their business. So whether that was mundane tasks, I would run to take people's Mercedes to the car wash. I would go to over state lines in Delaware to get them their cheap wine and fill up their wine cellars, do all these random things like at the end of college into my beginning years. That would just be basically, if you ever seen the show Entourage, like I was Turtle for a million people and for a million different people. And so there was a piece where, there was a piece of that was really fun. And I got to meet a lot of people, and it continued what I was talking about, which was while in my high school times as well, which was being around those types of people that were the CEOs and the founders and the innovators and the patent holders and the engineers and the scientists. As I'm sitting around these people, because they're the parents of the kids that I go to high school with, it's a lot easier when I then get out of college and into college. And when I get to college, I start working immediately. Started working full time for a beer wholesaler, and I was driving around basically doing beer sales and merchandising and going door to door selling cases and kegs of beer. And that allowed me to, from high school, have the confidence to walk into a business and say, "Hey, is Jim here?" Because I looked up online and saw Jim's the owner. Now, most people don't just walk in and ask for the owner by name, blah, blah, blah. I did it every time, because why? Well, it's public information. It's not a secret. The guy's name's Jim. And why would you ask for Jim? Well, because I want to talk to Jim. And so that was my system and it's the same as it is today even on my podcast or anything like that. My invite to people on my podcast to send it to you as well. It's one line. It just says, "I would love to have you on my podcast." And that's it. And that's the same thing I do in anything in life. And it's in my later years that I'm able to see that, because in my earlier years, I made those networks and those connections, is what I'm trying to get to. I went in the door and I wasn't arrogant. I didn't say, "Hey, give me Jim right now. I demand Jim's time." I would go in and I would say, "Hey, is Jim available?" If Jim wasn't available, I would find out when Jim was available so that I could see Jim on Jim's time and on Jim's schedule. I was conscientious and I was considerate of Jim. There's a difference in what we do today as different people in business and our level of arrogance and entitlement. And I think that what I see today as a business owner, as well as an employee of a company, as well as the person making the phone calls and being the cold caller, I find that my success is because of my authenticity and my genuineness and my respect for other people. My success is not because and also I outlast people, and that's wrestling. I know that I'm a third period winner. If I get you to the third period, you're tanking, I'm going. And if I didn't pin you in the first period, I didn't pin you in the second period, I'm probably going to pin you, or you're going to tank out in the third period. I'm not tanking out in the third period. I'm not tanking out in overtime. I'm not counting the lights. That's not what I'm doing. And if I do that and that does happen, oh, you'd be damned. I'm going to be spending time trying to figure out how the hell that happened. Because
okay, so let's talk about that. because especially in the podcast realm, my book is out and now it's changing businesses already. But the average podcast lasts 13 episodes. There is, I think, 3 million podcasts, but only 500,000 of them have released an episode in the last 6 months. So even like you said, if take me into the deep rounds, even like Rocky, take me into the 8th, 9th round. You're going to get tired. You're going to slip up, and I'm going to hit you with that triangle, or you're going to get popped in the jaw because you're tired. You're not focused anymore. But if you just outlast, like there was a book years ago. I'm an old man now. I'm 55. But the guy that started one of the largest insurance companies in the world, his name was A.L. Williams. And he came out of Atlanta. And he said, you may outthink me, but you'd outwork me. And then when you're tired, then I'm going to think. So I love what you say. Sometimes you got to put in, you have to stay that extra, go deep into the rounds, because a lot of people were only, they'll go hard at it for 3 rounds, but then they're going to poop out into the 5th and 6th, right?
And it was the same strategy. Like I've only been out once, but let's say like paintball or like when you play those video games or anything like that. I succeed when you're reloading. When you're sitting around trying to figure out what to do, that's where I'm capitalizing. When you're sitting there against the wall, taking a breath, I already opened the door and I'm out. Like I'm gone. Like, and that's where like, and I'll be honest with you, Richard, it's not something I always had. So here's the issue is when I was in that successful time, I wish that I had this mentality that I have in the past year and a half. If I had it back then, me personally, as well as my entire existence, would be a lot different if I had that mentality then, because I could have been in control of a lot more things. And those opportunities that I was in, I think I could have grasped even deeper. And I think that one of the things you had said too about taking the pause, I never did that ever. And I was on such a tear from the time I went and started the success and then went for a couple of years, it just back to back, and then all of a sudden fell apart. And we can get into that at any point you want to, as far as that goes. But as far as back to when you're stacking and you're looking at the success and thinking through, you always want to be looking at where everybody else isn't. And I don't tell people always be rare, always be unique, be diverse. And what I mean by that is use both sides of your brain, use both eyes that you have. Keep one eye on what you need to do, the standard traditional things. Keep one side of your brain focused on all those things that have proven through the test of time. Sorry, there's a lawnmower right outside the studio here. But the other side of your brain needs to be creative. And by creative, I don't mean painting a picture. It might be painting a picture literally, but I mean painting a picture in your head and constantly be looking at other industries and finding out what's working and seeing what can apply other places. One thing I love about certain things that I do is I'm not subjected to one thing. And one of the things I'm trying to say before is I stayed in the alcohol industry for so long, and that's my biggest regret, is not diversifying earlier to other industries, because I stayed in there so long and I always told myself, I'm a beer guy. And as soon as I opened up to other industries, I still stayed in beer. I still have beer in my life. I don't drink it, but it's still in my life. I still make revenue off of beer. I still sell beer. I love beer. I think beer is a great thing. It's just not good for me. And I think everybody should enjoy beer if it's good for them. But as soon as they feel like it's not good for them, they should pause and take some self-reflection. But I am by no means a teetotaler of prohibition. I am by no means believing that we should pull the alcohol off the shelves. I believe that marijuana and alcohol should sit together at the recreational place in moderation and in a place where people can consume it correctly and responsibly, because there are benefits to both and in moderation.
Let me ask you a question. Like, I'm clean and sober 35 years. If I look to my left, my wife has beer. She has wine down here. It's just not for me. People want to drink. That's great for them. I'm just allergic, so I don't even deal with it. But it's amazing when I go out to dinner or I go over somebody's house and I go down to their wine cellar, and they're like, "Yeah, this bottle of wine here is 10 grand. I'm never going to drink it, but it's 10 grand." And I'm
Yeah.
like, and I'm thinking, how many cases of beer would you have to sell if you could just sell that one bottle of wine? And I think there's a difference there, because when people are moving up into upper echelons and they have wine cellars, you start to think about money differently, because you're thinking about the beer still, but you're like, why is that wine 10 grand?
That wine is 10 grand, and they bought that wine because there's probably two reasons. One is it's going to earn them $100,000 or $1 million because they're going to share it with someone important that's going to not expect it, that's going to respect it and appreciate it, and it's going to earn them money. Or it's their diehard passion and they're a collector. Or third is it's their ego, because I've been with a lot of those people too. So there's always three. They're always the ones that want to brag to you that they have the $10,000 bottle. They're the ones that it's a tool for them. Or the third is it's recreational just for them.
Well, but there's a lot of people, and I used to be one of them, so I'm bagging on myself. Like, we were driving somewhere last week, and the houses here, they were going for like between 2.5 and 3.8 million. And I would drive by and I'd be like, I wonder what that asshole does. but now as I'm driving by, I'm like, I wonder what that guy does.
Yeah.
I appreciate all the work they've put in just to be able to have that. And I think once your mindset changes, like me lately, I don't know why. I've been looking on my Facebook page, looking at Lamborghinis, Testarossas, Ferraris, big boats. It's because I'm hanging out with people that have these things, and I'm appreciating the work it takes to get these things. But I'm realizing, if Frank or Joe can have a beach house, this guy can have a beach house. But if I'm hanging out with the guy across the street and he's only worrying about fixing his 1986 Honda, I can't get where Frank and Joe are going. So talk about the mindset of being around people like that.
So I just realized I was wearing the wrestling sweatshirt too there. So, hey, but yeah, exactly. The mindset's different, but it's also the same. So I don't look at things in a black and white area. Everything in my life is very gray. And so when you're talking with whether it's Jim with his 1986 Honda Civic or it's John with his $1 million yacht, they're both people that are working every day for the best that they can do. And if they're not, then that's on them, and that's different. But if we're talking about two individuals that are hardworking individuals, which is what we're talking about, we're not talking about scammers, we're not talking about fraudsters, we're not talking about any bums or anything like that just want to freeload. We're talking about two hardworking individuals. Whether they make $500 a week or they make $1 million a week, both those people have to look their significant other in the eye. They have to look their children in the eye, and they have to have a life that they want to wake up to go to every day. One thing I can say is you can really tell, it doesn't matter whether somebody's making $500 a day or they're making $1 million a day. You can tell whether or not they have a confidence and a success and a happiness in life. You can always tell that when you actually talk to them. And that's how I gauge people. I don't gauge people on their bank account. I don't gauge people on what they can do for me or anything like that. I gauge people on their demeanor and how they treat other people. So, for example, my life has been a lot in the alcohol industry. So one thing in my life that was really fun was I got to fly all over the country, basically doing analysis of breweries and finding the right breweries to build distribution systems in Pennsylvania to bring their products back. And now I had a whole report that I would do. I literally flew out there and I would have this whole process of it, go there, be a customer, be a consumer, and grade myself into the system and the place. They would never know I was there, kind of a secret shopper type thing. And then I would eventually go back the next day and we'd start talking distribution agreements and things like that. So I was flying across the country cold, walking into places by myself covertly. Now, Richard, I'm 6'3", 300 pounds. I'm not very covert in anything that I do. So you can imagine how I'm trying to be that. What I'm trying to say is I would walk in, and most times the most successful deals weren't even the biggest, prettiest breweries that existed, or distilleries or wineries. They weren't the cleanest ones. They weren't the prettiest ones. They weren't the biggest ones. But the people always defined the success. Because 100% of the time, and I can guarantee this 100% of the time, we put through our distribution network, we put through about 140 different brands through our distribution network. Every single time, it didn't matter the brand. Every single time, it mattered about the people that were behind the brand. So I guess to long-windedly answer your question, what I learned in my life is it doesn't matter if they're millionaires, billionaires, or if they're on welfare. If they're a good person, they're just a good person. It's just like they're open to the conversation. If they're good and they're open, then good things can come from that.
Okay, and the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because I interviewed Lee Steinberg, the greatest sports agent of all time, and they wrote the movie Jerry Maguire about him. And I had him on the show, and I said, "Take me back to the day when you had Peyton Manning come in, and you interviewed him to be his agent, and then you had Ryan Leaf come in, and who's going to be the number 1 and the number 2 pick?" And I said, "Did you know that Manning was going to be the man he was? And did you know that Ryan was?" He's like, "Yes, and you see who I chose to stick behind."
Yep.
And he said, because Peyton was that humble guy, but Peyton also was the most prepared player ever. So talk about that. Is like sometimes I'm sure you walked in a brewery and everything looked great. Everything might have been spotless and looked great, but you walked in, you're like, something ain't right.
Yep.
Something just isn't right. And I don't know what it is, but I feel something's right. And maybe we're going to pass on this. So talk about that. Is sometimes you really have to, I'm a poker player, so sometimes you really have to read people. And sometimes, usually for me, if I feel something's off, 99% of the time something's going to be off. So talk about that important part of business is learning how to read people and talk to people.
Now, this is going to sound a little weird out of context for people that don't know me, but I'm not claiming to be a psychic or anything like that, or an empath or anything like that in a spiritual sense. But I do read people really well, and I do not necessarily, some might call me very crunchy and hippie or anything like that, but I'm not when it comes to the feeling energies and things like that. So if I walk in a place, I can feel an energy pretty quickly when I interact with people and understand what's going on. With that said, when you walk into places and you're trying to gauge people, there's a lot of keys and a lot of flags that can happen. And you watch the way, even to the point where I watch everything to the point of how a check is placed or how a glass is placed, the demeanor in which someone places the menu down, the demeanor in which they open a chair or greet someone or not greet someone, whether they're scripted. That's another thing. That's 100% of one of the issues is one of the things we later in my life, when I became a consultant after working in the wholesale world in 2017, I started working directly with brands to help them grow their business. And one of the biggest things was working with them on getting themselves out of the script and being authentic and genuine, because so many of us in various aspects, whether we're in sales or we're marketing or we're a hostess or we're a teenager that's working at a fast food place, you're given these scripts and it's automatically, it's the comfort and it's what they told you to do. So you're going to do it and you don't want to veer off from it. And we become very robotic. And that process I started when I was 15 years old working at Hardee's in Hancock, Maryland. And that same thing happens as you get older. If you can at a young age learn to, it's not questioning authority. It's making it your own. And that's something that I think as a society are only recently allowing people to embrace, because so many times we grew up and it was like, you're going to be a firefighter, a policeman or president or whatever. But it's like nowadays you can't list all the things somebody could be. You know what I mean? It's just unbelievable what somebody can be and somebody can make of their life, and it's one of those things where you don't have to follow in your parents' footsteps anymore because there's so many things out there, and some people might have to. And that's unfortunate, for those situations. And I know many of those people that never wanted to follow in their parents' footsteps, but they were forced to, and they didn't get to carve their own path. And sometimes that leads to a life of resentment. And I feel for those types of people, even if they're millionaires sitting in a mansion. I still feel empathy for those people because they're not living the life they want to live. And that's the problem when we get sucked into money and we get sucked into this passion of money, and realize that when you allow the money to control your decisions, you lose what really is that. Go back to the very beginning, Richard, when you asked me what wakes me up in the morning. It's not getting paid. It's making positive momentum in my life.
You
And
mean vertical momentum, right? Vertical
that,
momentum.
that is correct. That is correct. And that is, I should have gotten that pun, and that is on me. That is a failure on me. That is a failure on me. I should have had that. Oh,
well,
man.
So let me ask you a question, because I started my sales out as in timeshares, and I sold them for 10 years. And like I said, I'm listening to The Way of the Wolf again for a second time. And it was amazing when everybody graduated and we all got out on the floor. Each person was saying the same exact thing, table for table for table. And for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to take what they told me to do, because I'm a big a pro wrestling fan. I love pro wrestling. I'm a big fan. I got a lot of friends in pro wrestling. And they would tell them the script, and then they would put it in the Hulk way. They would put it in the Rock way or the Undertaker way, and they would make it their own. It's the same information, but you're making it your own, and it's not scripted because you're saying the same things, but you're using your vernacular, you're using your words, and you're not being like everybody else. Like when you walk into a GNC, hi, how are you? How can I help you? Any GNC you went to, you walked in, they say the same thing, and everybody gives the same answer. I'm just looking.
Yep.
So pretty much you just open a closed-ended question, a yes or no, and you shot yourself when a person just walked in the room. So talk about making your script unscripted.
Yeah, everything I've done in my life has been unscripted. Now, my family and my ex-wife, and my current wife, and everybody, all my kids and everybody like that are going to laugh, because it is. My life is it's very much unscripted, and it is very spontaneous, and it is that in a sense of, it's also very systematic though, Richard. So while it looks like chaos, it's organized chaos. And the reason is because I leave that freedom and that cushion. I leave a cushion of opportunity every day. And I don't book myself. I book myself solid, but I also book myself in a block way, so that it's like, okay, in this moment, I'm focused only on this. And in this moment, I'm only focused on this. I personally, for me, that has to be the way it works, because my brain, I'm the guy I'm up all night long. If I got an idea, I got those giant Post-it notes that are 3x4s. Yep. I got them all over my basement. And I a couple of weeks ago just had that, where it was like a 48-hour burst, and I just went nuts. And I'll send you some pictures of it. And it was amazing. And it was just a great burst of creativity and organization. I leave myself the opportunity for that because I used to suppress that. And I used to just stay grinding and stay focused and do, what can I do? Every day I woke up saying, what can I do to make my boss money? And that's something you're supposed to do. And that is what you're supposed to do every day. But at the same time, you lose sight of what actually drives yourself too. So I had to break things down, and I had to really start saying, okay, what are the number one core things that's going to bring me joy in my life? And if I can achieve that every day, then therefore I am successful. When I say I've had success, Richard, my success is not tied to monetary values. My success is tied to the fact that I'm sitting here 38 years old. There's many stories I could tell you where I probably should be dead. Some of which are self-inflicted from different substances that I've experienced in my life. Some, I could tell you, at 20 years old, I had my head cracked open, 49 stitches from a Philadelphia city police officer. That stuff happens. It's like things happen in your life and you have to keep going. I was sitting in the hospital and I could see my skull and everything just by some Yahoo that ended up I could tell you that story in a million times. And let's just say justice was served on my end and not for him. So, you get people that get into situations, whether they're, let's say, in moments of power or moments of CEOs running companies, or if they're service workers, or if they're just here to keep the peace. Everybody has to be checked, including myself.
All right. So, but let me ask you a question, because goes back to what you're talking about is, like Wednesday's my recording day. That's what I do all day from 9 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night. My wife knows don't plan anything because Wednesday's recording day. But tomorrow morning, we're taking off on a 4-day trip. We're going to Great Wolf Lodge. Then we're going to see Barry Manilow on Saturday night. Then we're going out for dinner. But I'm going to be taking pictures all these times, and I will be posting them so people will be like, it's not all about work, but he also has a life. But why work so hard if you can't let your family enjoy the fruits of your labors? So a lot of people I see on their social media, it's all work, 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 work. But then you don't see the wife, you don't see the kid, you don't see going on vacation. Like I'm going on a 7-day cruise to the Bahamas, and I can't wait. So what's the sense of working so hard if we can't enjoy what we're doing? And I think if you see my page and it's all business, but every couple of days you see a picture of me and my bride or my kids and my dog, you're gonna be like, I can relate to that guy because he's working for a reason. He's doing these things, and I want to be able to do the same thing to have that work-life balance. So is that what you're talking about? It's not just all work, it's got to be fun too?
100%. It is very much. So here's where my whole life I took this phrase, and it's been the same phrase, but it's gone to adaptations. Work hard, play hard. All right. And it's work hard, play hard, and it's balance. It's not work hard, play harder. And so where I would tell you is that line has been in my life my whole life. I've stretched it and I've abused that line. And I've taken that line that was work hard, play hard, and I've used it as an excuse, and it's adapted to work hard, play harder. So where I'm trying to get at is the more I keep work hard, play hard balanced, that's where my success is. Because the second that the play hard starts to get away, then the work falls away, and then the happiness falls apart. And then on the reverse side, if the work comes too high, then the play comes down, and then I don't feel like I've had a quality of life. I don't feel like I've engaged as much with my family and things like that. So that simple phrase is my balance. I'm a visual person, so I look at things in balance, and I look at things in proportions and such. And I think that work hard, play hard is really what it comes down to. And to answer your question, success, my goal every day also is to have the freedom of my life. I'm a big control person. I'm a big control person now in my life because I did not have control of certain things in my life prior. I am in control of certain things because I have to be. Because if I'm not in control of certain things, I don't trust myself, my brain when I go out, and I just don't. If I turn out and tune out, I'll be a million miles away unless I focus and I stay intentional. And every day I have to stay intentional and stay focused and really be conscious of where I am and what I'm doing and being present. And even to the point, Rich, where I'll take my shoes off sometimes and just stand in the grass during the day just to remind myself, like, oh, what's going on? Because we just get crazy, man. We all get crazy and we all get in our cycles. And like we were talking about earlier about that 3 minutes or 3 seconds, that's 100% as a part of everything else we're talking about too, is not allowing disappointments and rejections. And like I'm outbound all the time. That's all I do is outbound, coast to coast, local, everything like that. And I'm probably, 9 out of 10 times being told no, F off, things like that. It doesn't faze me because I'm of a mindset of abundance that I'll eventually find the right person, and that'll make up for all the no's.
Okay, so but now, like I had Mr. David Meltzer. We all know David Meltzer. He's got a $20 billion company with Warren Moon, and I had him on the show, and he says, like you're mentioning, he blocks out time. He said, I block out 5 minutes just to call mom. Yep. I block out a couple minutes just to talk to my daughter. And for me, once I started, like, I live by Calendly. Calendly is my lifesaver. Mm-hmm. Even if I'm going to, I might take a break during the day and go play Madden for an hour. But I make sure I block it out so I can say, okay, you have an hour, set your alarm, go play. But I realize the more I'm in control of my 1,440 minutes, the more I'm going to be successful. Like The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. He has 1,440 minutes the same way as I have 1,440 minutes. It's just whatever he does and he focuses on with his 1,440 minutes. So I love that you talk about work hard, play hard. But for me, I got to make sure that, well, okay, you have to be flexible, because some shit happens and you can't get all twisted about it. But try to stay on track as much as possible. Like I'm telling everybody, I'm not answering nobody back in the next 4 days. I'm going on vacation. So, but I think because I blocked it out. But I think if like my friend James Clear wrote the book Atomic Habits, if you're not running your schedule is going to be running you, right?
Well, it's actually first degree of separation. That's where this came from. So Atomic Habits is where this came from recently. It's going back to you'll see that I keep harking back to wrestling. That's what it was in wrestling. It was block scheduling. So my life was 5 a.m., 6 a.m. workout, 7 a.m. this and this, and my whole thing was a giant Excel file and it was color coded, and I loved it. And I even to this point right now, again, my body viscerally is reacting with goosebumps when I think about the color coding of the Excel file. So it wasn't until recently when I kind of started settling into certain patterns and I started re-embracing those systems that I was able to look at it. And so to answer your question, it's the exact same thing for me when when I'm doing this stuff. And sorry, my screen went off here for a second.
Oh, you're looking good here.
Oh, there we go. All right, yeah, I lost you. All right, so yeah, when I'm in that aspect and looking at the block scheduling, I have everything color coded. So I have rec time, I have creative time. I also block creative time. What I want to say to that about focus is I also mute my phone. I put my phone on mute. I use my out of things, my out of offices. Because in my line of work, I have certain people that I know if they're reaching out to me, that there's a chance that there's not, whether it's family, my kids, my wife, that they can pass through my block time and on my technology, they can pass through it as well as anything with work related, so certain clients, things like that. But my block time is not 7 hours. You know what I mean? And that's the reason is I leave it short stints because I want to be accessible, but I also want to be protective. So what I'm trying to get at is, Richard, when I sit down with somebody and I have a meeting with them, I'm not playing on my phone. I'm not playing on my computer. I'm 100% present in that meeting, whether it's Zoomed or not. And the flip side, when that person's trying to, let's say it's a client and I'm doing a meeting with them and I'm 100% focused. On the flip side, when they try to get a hold of me and they complain, I say, hey, listen, you're not my only client. That's something that's not supposed to be mean. You need to understand that I'm doing my job. But on the flip side, I'm giving somebody the same 100% attention that you want when you schedule time with me. So I need to give that to somebody else as well. When you start to make people realize what you give them, people sometimes, and it's tactful is also the way to do it. You have to tactfully tell them when you give them that, because today I get a lot of weird questions sometimes because my phone is always on vibrate. I don't have a ringer on unless I have to, in a situation where I need to. I'm in a position in my job where nothing is life or death in that second. So if it's 5 minutes between or a minute in between me hearing the buzz, that's fine. It's in my pocket. So I hear the buzz. I can acknowledge the buzz. I can ignore the buzz, and I can focus on what's going on in front of me rather than a ringer that's going to interrupt me, interrupt the person, interrupt something else, and interrupt the flow of everything that's going on. So there's little things like sounds, little distraction points that take myself away from focus that I've learned to eliminate recently in my life and seen how much they've affected different aspects. I also have like block social media during certain times. So I'm on social media a lot because it's part of my job. I'm also not on social media a lot because it's part of my job. So with that, it's blocking time and really being like, okay, this is all work time and it's zero social media time. It doesn't matter if I got a buzz of breaking news or whatever else. It is protected time. And to get back into the tangible piece about focus, when you were talking about the block calendar scheduling too, also that tangible piece of like, I used to just say yes to everything. So if somebody was like calling me and say, hey, listen, would you go do this? Would you go do that? I was like, yeah. I was double booking myself all the time. And then I would have to go back and I'd have to say no to somebody or I have to whatever. What I can do now is when I go into Google Calendar and Calendly, in order to say yes to someone, I always anytime to anybody, I say I will check my calendar in the next 24 hours. I'll get back to you. Even if I'm sitting there and they'll be like, they'll be like, but you have your phone in your hand. I'm like, it doesn't matter. I don't say yes to things without sleeping on it at least or at least an hour or something like that. And what it also helps me is when I go to that Google Calendar and I see that something's already booked, then it goes to what you're talking about is, okay, what did I already commit to? And then what am I being asked to commit to? And then where's the value in each? And not always for me. It could be for somebody else. And it's also where's the flexibility. So let's say, let's say all of a sudden it's, I hate to say these things, but let's say my wife and I have blocked time for dinner, which I do. We block date time. My wife is a clinical manager at a hospital. She's a nurse. So she lives a crazy life as well on that end of things in labor delivery. So we both have wild lives, and scheduling is important. And I think that when you have to tangibly look at what was there and decide on one or the other, that helps as opposed to just reactively saying yes to things and then going back later and having to clear up that fire drill and that mess that just occurred. Because at the end of the day, too, here's my thing, too. I used to say it because people would be like rushing me and be like, hey, I need your answer today. And then eventually, as I got older, it was like, if they're rushing me and they have to have an answer today, they fucked up by not preparing and asking me 3 weeks ago. So that's not my problem. I don't need to like rush my life into a decision for them. If I can wait like an hour or two and like digest it for a second and make sure it's the right decision for me, it's the right decision for my family. And in reverse, sometimes it might be the right decision for the other person. So sometimes I'm not always selfish. Like I'm talking about me and my family, but sometimes I've had to call my wife and say, hey, listen, we got to cancel this, or I got to come a little bit later, or we got to remove this around because this person needs me. And honestly, it's the only time they can do it, blah, blah, blah. It is a flexibility, and it is a tightrope of getting sustainable and filling your cup up enough, but also realizing if you're always filling your cup, somebody's cup's getting drained. So you got to balance those two out.
But I agree with 100% what you're saying, but for me, you have to be, I'm flexible, but for me, the way my life is run, it's God, family and friends, business. Everything else comes after that. And if it's not in those four things, I'm probably going to say no 90% of the time because it's going to take me away from one of those four things. And of course, shit happens. But you have to start saying, okay, if I do this, is it going to get me towards the goal that I'm trying to get to? And I only started becoming successful is what I had a guest on 2 years ago on New Year's Eve, and we were talking, and he's challenged me. He says, I want you to write 2 words down for 2023. And my words were intention and attention. And I realized that if I make sure that everything I'm doing is intentional, then I'm going to get the attention that I need on my business. And then we blew up. But now in 2024, my 3 words are intention, attention, and retention. Because if my bucket still has a big as hole as the top does, then it doesn't do me any good. So those are my 3 words. So I'm like you, I try to make sure that I stay in my lane. But like Kobe Bryant said, and I try not to curse on here, but it's my show. Kobe said, his coach told him one time to stay in your lane. And Kobe was like, I'm going to stay in my lane, but I'm going to dominate that motherfucker. So talk about that is, making sure there's non-negotiable. Like you're a man, you have an amazing family, you have an amazing wife, you got amazing kids. Me and you, we're not going to go cheat on our wives. That's a non-negotiable. Me and you are sober now. We're not going to go out and drink. That's a non-negotiable. And I think if you're going to be a business owner, you need to have non-negotiables built into your business, right?
Absolutely. And to go to your stacking in your hierarchy, we are connected even on your hierarchy. Now I differ on the number one priority as a spiritual humanist, but we have the same objective. Your number one's God, my number one is love. It's the same. God is love. Your God is love. My God is. I don't, but that's what I'm trying to say is that is the one thing that ties everybody together, and that's my religion is just good love. And what that means also to business is the same. Just like you would look at it and in a certain level, I insert God there. God is my God, or I would insert love there as where you would put in God. Same thing when I was in AA. Same thing. I do not, my higher power is not God. My higher power is love. And that includes everything in my life that I do, including business. There were times where I would sit in meetings and I mean, I keep going back to the alcohol, but let's be honest. There are times where I would be in a bar and I'm out there selling so much stuff and trying to sell numbers and not thinking about what does this mean if, and I'm going to say this is probably going to piss off a lot of people in the industry, but I'm going to say this from a responsibility standpoint. Everything I'm saying is for moderation. But the amount of times that I would be out at bars till 2:00 in the morning with the goal of getting the most units over that bar and never having the consideration of what happens to any of those people after that evening closes. That reality gets pushed away. And all your objective is selling. And this could be with anything. I use alcohol as the example, so they're going to be the scapegoat of this conversation. But the same thing, insert anything that you're doing. If what you're selling to the level you're selling it at is deteriorating someone's life, there's a moment where freedom takes a backseat and you have to realize, what are you doing? So let's say this, for example, and I say this because I'm in industries that people don't like. I'm in the alcohol industry. I'm in the marijuana industry. I'm in all those industries. The difference in me and a lot of people is I look at it and say, okay, at freedom of choice. We all have the freedom of choice. If they choose to take it, it's theirs. If they choose to drink it, it's theirs. That's true. Where we have a line as human beings in a society is to how much do you want to push someone and how far are you pushing someone to make that consumption of that product that shouldn't be consumed in numbers of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 13, 14. But yet, like when you're intentionally doing those things. So it's that fine line of marketing and sales and realizing what is the driving factor, like you're talking about. What is the goal? Is the goal to make money? If the goal is to make money, then yeah, everything else might not exist. Is the goal to make money and do something else? Yes. Is the goal to do money, make something else, and a third thing? Sure. Whatever those 3 things are, or 4 things are for you, need to work. But at the end of the day, like, to look yourself in the eye and to look yourself in the mirror, the money has to be second to, are you contributing positively to society? And that's something that I have had many sleepless nights over because of how successful I was at selling alcohol. I have a lot of sleepless nights wondering, and myself included. It's like I've had issues of I'm an open book. Anybody can look me up online, good, bad, and ugly. And I answer every question of people about my issues with that. I speak to people not on a soapbox about it. I speak to people as a warning. I speak to people as an understanding, because I know that while we're talking about grit and grind and perseverance, this is going to sound arrogant, but I know a lot of people that wouldn't go through the shit that I went through and stay there. There's a lot of people that I've been in recovery meetings in the circle with the folding chairs, and they're still there. And they're still fighting, and they're still trying to wake up every day, and they're still trying to figure out what is their reason for waking up. Because that's the part that we underestimate, is the little basic understandings of life. My idea, I'm talking to you about what is my goal in life? What's to go out and work and go get my job. A couple of years ago, my goal was to stop grabbing that bottle and to stop doing this. And then it took a little different things and stacking. So like everybody's goals are different every day. But as long as it's about love and it's about positive momentum, it doesn't matter how little your goal is, because eventually it'll become a big one. And it has to start somewhere. And there's nothing that makes me more sad than going to AA meetings and hearing the same stories over and over again.
Yeah.
And literally the repeated stories. And I don't say that as a bad thing. I want everybody to be there. I want to be there, but I want a new story. We as human beings get stuck in these traumatic moments and we stay there. And as much as it is hard, as much as it is, we have to understand and have to heal. And you don't have to heal and be perfect. That's the biggest thing that helped me. I thought I had to be perfect. I thought everything had to be perfect in order for me to emerge back into the world. Because being the face of a lot of things in the beer industry and then going sober wasn't an easy task. It wasn't. I'm now at a place where, yeah, I can go to a bar, I can sit at a bar, I can do whatever. But it was a long time where I was afraid of bars for a while, and I disappeared. And I lost a lot of friends and a lot of people that, might have been my bar buddies and things like that. And I haven't seen them and talked to them in years. And I might have spent nights. Some weeks I might have spent more time with them than I did my own family. I haven't spoken to them. I don't even know where they are. I don't really care because they were serving that purpose to each other. We were doing something that wasn't positive. It wasn't love, and it wasn't a positive momentum. So it's not something that we need to be participating in as human beings. And I think that the reason I'm stressing this so hard right now is, Richard, I feel very passionate about the decline in love and the decline in common understanding and civil discourse. And it frightens the hell out of me every day to see that people can't, to see that like a podcast like mine or yours, where there's no scripts, there's no agendas, that's a foreign idea. Why is it such a foreign and unique idea that two human beings are just connecting? That's what's insane, is that we have to, I have to actually put it on my thing saying, this is a genuine, real conversation. Like, we have to point that out. Because
but don't you think that there's a reason why Joe Rogan's podcast is so popular? Because it's just sitting down, shooting the shit, taking his on its brain supplements, but just talking about real things. And it may go 10 minutes, it may go 4 hours. It's just real conversation.
And there's something about Joe Rogan's style that I love. And I've gone in different moments with Joe. And I say that I'll say his first name like I know him. I never met the guy. So I've had moments where I've agreed with him 100% and moments where I disagreed 1,000% with him. But I still stuck with him. And I had moments where I stopped and gave it a break for a little while when he went on certain tangents. But I still came back. And I actually came back recently because of exactly what we're talking about. Because who are we if we don't agree with somebody to just cut them out? And to like be like, oh, that one thing that I don't agree with you on means I don't have to agree with you on anything else. Like, how two-dimensional do we think we are as people, and how non-complex do we believe we are? Because we are more complex than we think, that we just can cut someone off because of one topic. So I'm glad you brought up Joe Rogan, because he, I've followed him since the beginning, since the days when I think he was in a basement or something like that, and before. Yeah. And then I went away for a little while when things got a little crazy. But I came back to him, and I came back when I heard him say this to somebody. Somebody said, "How do you do this all day long with the churning of guests and things like that?" And he said, I just come in and I just talk. And I said, and I heard this recently. This is like last week or 2 weeks ago, I think. He was talking about it, and he said he has no idea sometimes who he's talking to. Like, the people will tell him, oh, this is going to be a big episode. This is going to be, he just ignores them and he just goes in and does it. And he won me over with that, because all of a sudden that thing that I thought was a instinctual thing that was normal for me, I've realized is not normal. It's not normal to approach people without an agenda. It's not normal to have a Zoom call without a piece of paper in front of you. It's not normal to walk in a door and ask for the owner of a pizza shop you've never ordered a pizza before at. But these are things I do every day because I know how to. And I'm blessed in a way that I know how to utilize those skills. And I don't hesitate. Here's where it's not arrogance, it's actually confidence, because I also don't hesitate to show other people how to do it. I acknowledge that other people, and I'm going to make fun of my wife. My wife is one of the biggest introverts I've ever met in my life. I have to drag her out into social things. I'm used to that. And that's not a bad thing. And it's just, I'm used to doing that. And, finding people's comfort levels are so important, and understanding people's comfort. But where you were going back to is what's the line and what's the defining line. My defining line about things is not cutting people off at one issue.
I agree 100%.
Whether it's politics, it's religion, it's gender, whatever million things you can say. I don't give a shit who you are or what you do. There's something we're going to connect on. Because I'm a weird guy. People don't understand me. Like, they'll think I'm liberal, I'm moderate, I'm conservative, because it depends on what you're talking about. Because when it comes to human beings, I lean very left. I'm very socially conscious. I'm very much. When it comes to my business, I go that way. Where I don't go is I don't go all the way. I don't go all the way. I don't believe that we're at the tail end of the 90. I don't want to open up that can of worms. But I believe when it comes to, let's just say this. I'm going to say this. No matter how much money you make, whether it's $10,000 or $500 or $10 billion, proportionally, everybody should do the same. And that means if the person that's making $10 million needs to proportionally giving as much focus and attention on society as the person that's making $5. I don't mean this from any other way other than that.
No, and I agree, but I think as we're winding down that for me, I think the world would be a much better place if somebody just asked why. You
There's a
know,
book I want to leave you with. It's Simon Sinek. Start with why. I read it
yep.
on the beach in Jamaica a couple of years ago. It impacted my life very much. It was right when I started. It was right when I got sober, actually. And start with why. Excellent book.
Even like when I chatted with Dean Graziosi, talking about the 7 whys.
Yep.
If you know your why, and if me and you, I'm a fiscally conservative guy. I go liberal, depends on certain things. But if I'm having a conversation, I'm not going to get all stupid and argue. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
going to be like, Nate, why do you feel that way?
Exactly.
Tell me, share with me so I can learn. And if we can all just go break bread together and be like, okay, I feel this way because I feel that way because, but if your answer is, well, why are you a Democrat? Well, because my grandfather, and their grandfathers were Democrats. If that's your answer, then we have a big problem. But if you say, well,
I'll agree with you 100% on that. Yeah, if your reason, if you don't have a sound reason, I don't care what your reason is, but have a reason.
yeah. So, this is a teaching podcast. So you've been in business a couple minutes. You've been around the block a few times. So my perfect avatar is a 45-year-old male father, veteran, business owner, a brand new business owner. So if somebody is going to start a business in May of 2024, what would be your top 3 pieces of advice that they can start using today or in this coming week?
I'm the opposite of a lot of people, and it's going to surprise you. I do not overly analyze things. If I have an idea, I test the idea. Now, with that said, I don't invest in a prototype or all these millions of things. If I have an idea, I, within my network or within looking around, find someone that's would be a customer of mine or would be someone that has understanding of that, and I pitch my idea to them in a trusting way. Now, everybody, I know NDAs and all this other stuff, and it can get a little complicated. My situation is this: I also immediately, when I come up with an idea, I look it up to make sure nobody else is doing it. One thing I think nobody else is doing is everybody needs to understand it's very rare to come up with an original idea. And when you go out there, before you start spending a ton of time and things and a ton of money and things, if an idea flights into your head, look it up, research it. I go back to branding and I look at like the beer industry or other industries, how the names are all very similar and different things like that. You got to go back and you got to make sure nobody else is doing it. If you're going to do something that somebody else is doing it, you better damn well be doing it better than them. Don't do the same thing. Don't do the same thing. Don't just walk in and get a franchise. Here's my thing, and I get a little bit of a rant about franchises and things like that. Go in and do a franchise, but then they just follow, like we're talking about. You go into the formula, you go into the thing, and there's ways to veer off and be yourself to improve the greater good. So what my other thing would be is, if you have an idea, let's say, get real world feedback. So I always tell people, don't fall into the American Idol syndrome where you sing in the shower and in front of your parents and you think you're awesome, and then you go in front of the judges and you bomb on national television. Like, that's what happens. Like, I've seen it, and even in the beer industry, home brewers that think because they give out free beer to their friends that they're good brewers, and they come in and do a pitch and they just bomb because nobody wants to buy it. Everybody wants to drink it for free. So that's the defining factor, is testing your concept. And then the next level is it a concept that somebody would find monetary value in? And how does it then, where does the price and where's the value and things like that? But first, you need to find out if there's value, period. You need to find out if there's any reason that it should exist before you even start the research process, before you even start getting rejected or anything like that. Just talk to somebody. Don't work in a silo in the basement because that's what you've been doing, and because you're in a funk and you have the lights out and the Zoom lights on you, and you got to reach out, you got to be open, and you have to, let me just say this cautiously, but you have to trust people. You can't just think that you know everything, because this is the most cliched thing in the world, but you do not know what you do not know. And when you go out in business and you make that investment and you find out somebody in Colorado has the same name, but you already spent 10 grand and that's all you had was 10 grand on the trademark and the patent and all this other stuff, or you bought because the domain existed, but somebody else started the business 10 years ago and they don't have a website and they sued you and you had to shut your business down. These are basic things that people are not doing when they come up with an idea, and they take minutes. And I really think people need to understand that everybody at the end of the day is here. Not everybody. Let me take this back. There's a lot of people that are there to help you in this world. And they might not look like it. They might not seem like it. They might not be what you visualize as someone that can help you. But I've sat down and had conversations with homeless people in Philadelphia and learned lessons that have still stayed with me today. And I've sat at the Wynn in Las Vegas and discussed equity shares of a $125 million company before. Like, I've done those things. I've done those things because they're important to me and because the people that are involved in them are important. Whether it's the person on the side of the road or it's the boardroom, it's the people. And trusting people has got me burned more times than I want to share, but it's also made, I've also won a lot because of it. And I think that people need to not be afraid of the failure and not be afraid of that distrust. Not be afraid to get burned, because you're going to get burned. Nobody's not going to get burned. If you're going to sit around and dodge every single punch that comes your way, you're the most boring boxer in the world and nobody wants to watch you fight.
But isn't that the price of success? Is you got to pay your dues.
That's what I'm trying to say.
You got to take the blow.
I appreciate you saying it that way. You don't get success by people coming to you. You don't get success by sitting in the basement wondering when somebody's going to call and order your product online. You don't get success by that. Success comes by pounding the pavement, hitting the phones, hitting the email, hitting the social media, and getting out there. And whether it's physical or digital, it's the same thing. You just need to be out there. And I think that it's scary. I'm not gonna lie to you. People can go in and be like, "Oh, you have huge followers on this and that." I'm not a celebrity, but I have like thousands of people that follow me on different things. Great. Why do they follow me? Because I keep put interesting content up.
Okay, so let me ask you before we log out, is my son, which I love my son. I got 3 beautiful children, but he came home one day wearing a t-shirt that was yellow like a banana, and he was wearing a hat looking like a banana, and I'm like, bro, what are you wearing? He's like, it's the Savannah Bananas.
Yes.
He's like, they're the #1 AAA or single A team in America. And he's like, but there's thousands of teams out there, but their stuff sells out every single game. They have pros that come and want to play the Savannah Bananas. You like, they just did things differently, and they can't keep the swag in stock. But like you said, because there's 1,000 different teams out there, but they did something different that people want to get involved with. So is that what you're talking about as far as businesses?
You know what? Savannah is they're the most amazing example of that. So take them. When we were growing up, it was the Harlem Globetrotters. Now, everybody wanted to go to the Harlem Globetrotters. Well, they're amazing basketball players, but they also did tricks. Savannah Bananas, they do the same thing. They do tricks. They do performances. Their consumer, their customer, their guest experience. They bring an experience. And here's the other piece that they bring that's the genius part. They bring that tangible human connection. So they emerge from the stands and have part of their songs and entries. They don't just emerge from the dugout. They come from the stands. They come from the concession stands. It's always an excitement, and it's a sensory experience for the guest and the customer, client, whatever you want to call it. And it's so much more than just watching baseballs get hit all day long. Like, I have friends that are the Phillies, ticket holders, and I go to games, and I love going to games. But I tell you what, you go to a Savannah Bananas game, you're going to be laughing, you're going to be having a great time, and it's not just about the game. And I think that's what, at the end of the day, is the takeaway is. That just organically came out. It's not just to get the game. It's not just about the business. It's not just about the person. There's so much more to it. And when you break free of that outline and that guideline and you start to get creative, examples like that do. And one of the other things, the last thing about that too, is think about how different the Savannah Bananas are to the Harlem Globetrotters. They were on a court. Okay. You couldn't enter the court. You couldn't really engage. They didn't really, you couldn't play basketball in the stands and like brush up against people, or they smell you, or they feel your presence and things like that. But with Savannah Bananas, they do. They immerse themselves into the stands. They immerse themselves in with the customers, in with the guests, in with the public. That tangible experience becomes a core memory that then takes that brand to a whole nother level. And I tell you what, there's a reason why you see kids wearing Savannah Banana shirts. And when have you ever in your entire life, have you seen kids wearing amateur farm league baseball shirts? They don't. I mean, maybe sometimes if it's like off of like a major league thing, but it's like you'll see them everywhere. And you know, the other thing is they took something that is an analog thing. They took an analog sport and they digitalized it with their marketing program. And they made clips that were viral. They made engaging things that not only transcended the experience in the stadium, but it made people experience it at home through their screens. That's the power. When your brand can transcend physically, like if you're a product on the shelf, but you only sell on the shelf and you can't sell online, there's a brand problem. There's a connection issue. You got to figure that out. It's not the end of the world, but you got to make that connection. People like Savannah Bananas, that group made the connection and transcended the physical game into the digital world and made a sport that is as old as apple pie and made it interesting in 2024. And kudos to them for it.
Yep. And there's a reason why. And this is the last thing I'm going to say about this is with branding and marketing, there's a reason why Taylor Swift moves the needle. Yep. There's a reason, because her Swifties love her and everything she does, but it's because the way she treats her fans and treats the people around her. I'm just going to say. So my last question.
I want to add to that because you brought up Taylor, and that's you had to bring up Taylor with me because I am a huge Kelsey family fan from back in the day. I stood there at the Super Bowl parade and watched him give that speech in Philadelphia at the Art Museum. And I got to tell you, if you want to look at other people and talk about authenticity and genuineness, that whole family and what you're talking about with Taylor, that whole connection, everybody can look at it whatever way they want. I don't really give a shit what everybody thinks about it. Those are people that are doing the deed. They're doing the job. They're putting back into their communities. The stuff that you don't see, the things you don't see because they don't promote, go online today. And like everything we're talking about today, behind the scenes, anybody that's listening to this, type in all those people, the Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift, Jason Kelce, Kylie Kelce, all those people, look them up. They are doing things in their towns, and they're doing things in other towns that aren't just in there. You got Jason Kelce and Kylie Kelce teaching children in Kansas City field hockey, teaching young girls field hockey in Kansas City. What does that have to do with Philadelphia? It doesn't, but they're making a positive momentum in the world that eventually will ripple out. And that's the stuff we're talking about is if you go through your day and you haven't contributed positively in any aspect, maybe this aspect or that to the world, get back out there and before you put your head on the pillow at night, put one positive thing out in the world every day. That's what I would close and ask with. I'm sorry. I had to add that one in there.
And they'll always have vertical momentum if you do that.
Vertical momentum. I'm sorry. You keep helping me. And I'm a branding guy and I can't even see it. That vertical momentum is exactly it. And I will tie this back to you. It is that vertical momentum and moving forward and stacking. Yep. And too many people get stuck here, Richard. Too many people get stuck on what's at the end. And they don't realize it starts with little steps.
Yep.
Yeah. You don't build that pyramid at the top first.
Yep. So how do we find you? How do we support your mission? By the way, like I said, I was so blessed and honored to be on your podcast. It's one of my favorite podcasts. So if your numbers have gone up, it's because of me, because I'm listening to every episode. So how do we get in touch with you? Guys, I want to say this beforehand. If you're not following his Instagram, if you're not following his LinkedIn profile, you're making a big mistake because I'm learning so much. So how do we find you, brother?
All right, man. Well, LinkedIn, it's Nate Fochtman. So Nate and then last name Fochtman right here on the screen. That's as easy as that is on LinkedIn. Just reach out to me on there and connect. Send me a message, anything like that. You'll see 2 days a week. I post 2 times a week, two episodes a week on the Free Mind podcast. That's available on YouTube, Spotify, everywhere you podcast. You can find that audibly as well as we have a visual as well as the audio versions. The visual version is on YouTube. It can also be found on our website, which is FMG, so fmgstrategy.com. That is for the Free Mind Group, which is the business I was talking about that I've had since 2008. On Instagram, same thing, Free Mind Podcast, the Free Mind Group. on Facebook. I'm not on, we're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, just not on X or Twitter. Yeah.
Okay.
And not by any principal choice, just I never got into Twitter.
So now that is normally my last question, but it's because it's you. I got one more question to ask.
You got it, man.
I had Simon Majumdar, Iron Chef. He's on right now. He's actually on Tournament of Champions, and I had him on the show, and he's like, because since COVID happened, we've lost over 100,000 restaurants in the United States. There's a lot of parents that are driving Uber, DoorDash, just trying to put food on the table. So time is very precious. If somebody's listening to us and I ask them to do something in 7 days, they're never going to get to it. But if I ask them to do something in 24 hours, they're way more likely to do it. So if somebody is struggling with their sobriety, what can they do in the next 24 hours to get some help?
That name right there, Nate Fochtman. They can reach out, LinkedIn, Instagram, anything like that. I will get back to them. Say that you heard me on this podcast. Tell me exactly what's going on. Don't just say hi. Say it like I told you. Say it like I told you. Say, hey, I'm having trouble. I'm strung out on heroin. I want to quit. Hey, I can't stop snorting this line. Hey, I have a sex addiction and I can't stop going to the strip club, or we're looking at porn. Hey, whatever it is, be honest with me and be honest with yourself. One line. It's not, hey, it's not, how are you doing? Be honest and upfront with yourself, and I'll respond to you right away. And if you're not comfortable with that, and you're in a problem and you have a problem, you know all those numbers. And and Rich will put the numbers down, and in here, there's suicide hotlines. There's other abuse lines. There's all these lines out there. Get out there. If it's NA or Alcoholics Anonymous, hop on the website. If you don't like a physical meeting, guess what? There's virtual meetings all day long. All you need to do is hop on the meeting and reset your brain. Okay. It's not as hard as you make it. It's all mental. It's all mental. And it starts with one decision. And that decision is to make that one statement. And that one statement is what's going on. And then back to what we're talking about. What's your why? What's going on and why do you want to change?
I love it. And guys, if you're struggling right now and don't want to talk to either of us, you can dial 988 and you can get help right now. Now, before I leave, I want to say my book is now available. It is only available for pre-order. And like I said, if you buy my book for $30, you're going to get a $997 value for $30. And it's also going to teach you how to go from thought to profit in 8 weeks. And there's certain people out there that want to be personally taught by me. I have one slot open to get personally coached by me for 8 weeks. So if you're interested in that, just write podcast down below. But as I end every show, guys, I'm a big Joel Osteen guy. I don't care what you think about him. But something that he always says, and I end with every show, is like we're talking about today. Today, I decide. You can be the victim of your past, or you can be the victor of your present and future. And if you listen to the Vertical Momentum podcast, you're a victor. You're no longer a victim. And thank you so much for being part of our family. Nate, my brother, I'm so grateful for you. And I can't wait to finally get together sometime, go hang out, go grab some lunch, chill out, and have a good time together.
Absolutely, Richard. I look forward to it, man. That's definitely something that's happening in our life for sure, buddy.
I love it. So, guys, make sure you check him out on all the social medias. And, guys, remember, Vertical Momentum. The only way to go is.
Everybody have a great day.
I love you, brother. Be good.